Back in 2013, I was attempting my first marathon, the London Marathon, and sadly it didn't go to plan. At 18 miles or just before, I collapsed from dehydration, heat exhaustion. And today I just want to take you through 5 mistakes that I made during that race and what you should probably try and do instead. So let's jump into it. Hello, I'm Nick. Back in 2010 I started running, and in October 2023 I decided to start a YouTube channel documenting my training as I attempt my first sub-3 hour marathon in 2024. Marathons are on my mind, so I thought today it would be good just to reflect on my very first marathon attempt back in 2013. So it was London Marathon, big iconic race, and as I said, it went badly. I collapsed. I didn't make it to the finish. My temperature was 40 degrees, so I was in a pretty bad way. So in this video I am going to just talk about 5 things that I got wrong and what you could do instead to ensure your first marathon doesn't end like mine did. So what not to do. Number 1, don't obsess about your finishing time. I had 3:45 really firmly in my head for my first marathon, and that's quite an ambitious time. I felt like it was achievable. I'd done a 1 hour 37 half marathon. It's my first half marathon back in 2010, so didn't feel it was out of the realms of possibility, but I was really gunning for 3:45, and that was a mistake. So what should you do instead is focus on finishing. It's your first marathon. There's going to be plenty more opportunities if you want to go faster, and you're doing something for the very first time, so don't put that pressure on yourself. You need to run it in a certain time for ego, for kudos, for whatever it might be, because I'm telling you, there's nothing worse than not finishing your first marathon. That's got to be the aim. That's got to be the number 1 goal. Think about finishing. And yeah, if you run a good time that you're happy with, brilliant, but let's not forget how hard the marathon is, and less than 1% of people actually do a marathon. So completing it is the achievement in itself, never mind whatever time you actually get. That's number 1. Number 2 is don't go out too fast. It's so easy to do, and to be honest, regardless of whether it's your first marathon or your 10th, many people go out too fast. At London I was certainly gunning for that 3:45 time. I went out too fast and I paid for it. So what you should be doing instead is making sure that the first half of the race, the first 30 miles, feels pretty easy in general terms. You should, be feeling fresh from your taper, and therefore you shouldn't be really struggling in that first half, because I'm telling you, that second half is going to be tough. So try and run within yourself, know what feels kind of strong but comfortable pace, and stick to it. Don't get caught up with the crowds, the excitement, because you will pay for it later. So number 3 is don't underestimate the impact of weather. So I trained in 2013 in a really cold winter in England. I didn't even put my vest on that I was going to be running in, a charity vest, until the week of the marathon. It was that cold, and suddenly, out of nowhere, it's springtime and it's warm, and my body wasn't prepared for that. So you've got to factor this in, that weather, hot weather in particular, is going to impact on the time you're going to run. Your heart rate is going to be higher, you're going to be working harder, you're going to lose more fluids and salts. So you've got to factor that in. And if you don't, like me, you could come a cropper. So number 4, and this relates to the weather, is don't be stubborn, be adaptable. So what happened to me was I had in my head that at London there's Lucozade Sport energy drink all at 5 mile points all the way around. So in 2013 my plan was just to drink the Lucozade Sport and ignore the water stations, which were every mile. I trained with Lucozade throughout my training, so I was used to it, so that's a good thing to do. But I just thought I wouldn't need water because I'd always got the option of Lucozade, and I could carry the bottle with me for a bit, then chuck it. And so I went into it with that plan, and I didn't adapt. As I say, it was a hot day. I needed to be drinking more than I had in my training, and I didn't do that. And what also happened was the Lucozade bottles, they were warm because it was a hot day. Therefore, when you got them, you're drinking warm liquid, not very nice. What are you gonna do? You're gonna drink less. So that's what I did, and it really cost me. What I should have been doing is drinking to thirst, pouring more water over my head, keeping myself cool, and I just didn't do any of that because I was absolutely drilled into what I decided pre-race. Now don't get me wrong, it's important to have a race plan, a nutrition plan, hydration plan, know what you're doing, but things like weather, they're not controllable, so you've got to be adaptable to that. And number 5, don't ignore the signs. Now don't get me wrong, you're gonna get to a point in a marathon, because they're hard, where your mind and sometimes your body is telling you to stop, to give up, and you can't do it. Largely, you want to try and push through that. You want to just keep going, because often it is your mind rather than your body playing tricks on you. So there's an element of fighting against that. But at London Marathon 2013, there were signs and I ignored them. The biggest one that sticks out for me is my family were waiting to see me at about mile 15, mile 16, and they were over one side of the road. So I made sure I did see them, but I wasn't even really with it at this point. But I remember then having to cross to the other side of the road to get to one of these drink stations where they had Lucozade Sport, and I was just like, this is such an effort. This is 15 miles in. It's not meant to be that hard. The idea of switching from one side of the road, I should have been buzzing at that point from seeing my family. They said I looked pale. They were right. And I even remember once I got the Lucozade Sport, I managed to just get a load of it in the jelly babies that I was eating. I'm on gels now, by the way, but it was jelly babies at the time. And so yeah, I made a mess of the bag that I was carrying it in. And this was all signs to me that my mind wasn't there. And not that long after, just before mile 18, I collapsed. I don't actually remember falling down. Or the first thing I remember afterwards was waking up in this St John ambulance tent. So my temperature, they told me after, was 40 degrees. I had ice packs all over my body to cool me down. It's a bit grim, but actually taking my temperature from my bum to try and get an accurate gauge of how hot I was. I was being sick, and I was just pretty much out of it, to be honest. I don't remember anyone helping me up, falling down, nothing. The first thing is just waking up in that tent. And I remember saying at that point, it was my first marathon and it was going to be my last. It was just a horrendous experience. But you know what? 2 years later, after quite a bit of time off training, I reflected and decided I want to give the marathon, and the London Marathon specifically, another go. So I got a charity place with St John Ambulance who helped me that day, and I ran it for them. And I'm pleased to say I did the things that I should have done, which was not obsess about time. I was aiming roughly for 4 hours, but that was neither here nor there for me. Enjoying the race. Like, when you're pushing hard the whole time, you're not getting that sense of enjoyment, and I think first marathons in particular are about trying to enjoy it for as long as possible, because it is going to get hard. I remember quite early in that race just feeling a little bit off, if I'm honest. I think it was partly the nerves and also the fear of not finishing again. Particularly, I've raised all this money and I wanted to get to that finish line so desperately, but what I did was just hold it back even more, just really take it easy. And as I went on, actually I started to feel quite a bit better. And what ended up happening was my neighbour, who I'd grown up with, she was also running London, and 2 years before, when I collapsed, she was actually in the crowd around sort of 17 miles. So she was as close to anyone to where I collapsed, and we passed each other early on in the race. I let her go, and then yeah, we ended up kind of coming back together around sort of 15-16 miles, so where things I think really started going wrong for me 2 years before. And yeah, we made a decision at that point that we wanted to finish together. It was the 35th year of the London Marathon, and the theme was hand in hand, because the first two finishes back in 1981 crossed the line hand in hand. So we decided to honour that and yeah, just stick with each other for that final 10 miles or so. And yeah, there was a time where I got cramp about 20 miles and had to slow down, and then Kerry, my neighbour at the time, did also have a period where she was struggling a bit and I was keeping her going. And yeah, we crossed the line in 4 hours 9 minutes, and honestly, the pictures from that day, the experience of running up the mile on past Buckingham Palace and Big Ben, I was able to drink it all in. And had I finished 2 years before, I don't think any of that would have happened. To come back 2 years later and do it was such an accomplishment for me, and set me up really for my running ever since. And as I said at the start, I'm going for sub 3 this year. So hopefully you found that useful. If you have, please do give this video a like. As I record this, I'm now just 2 weeks out from doing the Boston Marathon UK. By the time this comes out, it'll be just over a week away. So if you want to see how I get on in that one, please do consider subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.